It took Lampedusa to shake the world's conscience, but for years Africans have been literally dying to get to Europe. They try in their thousands by desert and sea, fleeing repression, war and poverty. But the AU and the EU have failed to come up with a solution. Why?
They were the pictures that shocked the world. The bodies of over 360 mainly Eritrean and Somali refugees who were trying to get to Italy and a new life in Europe. It was the worst incident since 140 migrants died in the Libyan Sahara back in 2001. In recent years, North African governments like Libya and Morocco have been paid millions by the EU to stop migrants from attempting the sea crossing. And earlier this month, Niger closed refugee camps and sent back over 100 people, but still they come. It seems Europe has no real answers apart from increased patrols. So what is the African solution? That's what we'll be discussing on this week's Africa Today.
Hello, I'm Henry Bonsu and this is Africa Today. If the tragic capsizing of that vessel weren't bad enough, consider what the migrants experienced before they took to sea. Survivors say they were passed from one people smuggling gang to another for thousands of pounds and claim many women suffered rape and torture at the holding camps in Libya. One Somali suspect has now been arrested. To put this into some perspective, between 1996 and 2011, some 1,700 people died trying to cross the Sahara, and in 2008 alone, another 1,000 people died trying to cross the Mediterranean. With me now to discuss this are Don Flynn from the campaign group Migrants' Rights Network, Alice Ukoko from Women of Africa, and on the line from Kuwait City, where he's attending the Arab Africa Summit, is His Excellency Dr. Mustafa Siddiqui Kaluko, African Union Commissioner for Social Affairs. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaluko, we'll start off with you. Just how critical an issue is this for you as AU Commissioner?
Oh, it is a very, very critical issue. And even before these incidents happened, we have been working seriously on these issues. But as you know, there is no quick fix solution to these issues. So most of the programs we've been working on, which are mostly together with the European Union, are mostly on facilitating our mobility, migration and employment issues, because we thought a lot can be done if we look at mobility itself. You know.
Exactly what form do these programs take? Because when you hear of people taking those risks, so desperate to leave Somalia, Eritrea, Niger and all those countries, the response doesn't seem adequate, does it?
Well, of course, if it's adequate, then we would have stopped the problems of people migrating. But it's not as easy as that. And we are looking, in the African Union, we are looking at the problem of migration from a certain point of view, and that is, we're looking at it as posing challenges and opportunities. And these are reasons why people move from one place to the other.
Well, we know what the challenges are, of course. The free movement of goods, services and people, that's guaranteed by the European Union. It's not guaranteed within Africa, but people are desperate, it would appear, to leave the continent, even though there are 54 different countries, and get to Europe. What are the opportunities?
The thing is, this is what I'm trying to say. People will move looking for a better life somewhere, and we have to look at the push factors. Question of jobs in Africa, people move to improve their standard of living, you know, and one very important aspect you have to bear in mind is that they move because they're desperate. Sometimes they look at the avenue of getting visas, you know, trying to get a visa. The procedure to get a visa sometimes is so difficult. They are willing to pay thousands of dollars and being used, you know, by people who smuggle people across the Mediterranean, you know, to get to these places. So that's why I'm talking about the question of mobility, which is also very important. And apart from that, we have an even more difficult problem. We have a lot of movement from one African country to the other. You know, South-South movement, you know, one neighboring country to the other is very, very important for us. And in fact, it accounts for an even greater number as the one you are talking about now. And secondly, it's not only...
I suppose the reason why people are so concerned about the movement from the south to the north is the tragedies, the very high-profile tragedies claiming hundreds of lives in one go. Alice Ukoko, is that what's at the top of your agenda at Women of Africa?
Yes, it's all right, Your Excellency. it is interesting to actually be on this show with you. I think one of the problems that this is actually bringing up is that Africans are failing to face their demons. The problem of migration is an African problem. And the reason people migrate is because they are desperate, is because their own continent and their countries are failing them, and they go out to the West to try to make things better. I have been at the forefront of trying to find out why our children, not just children, I was told when I was in Libya, that in fact, PhD holders are traveling in this dangerous way to get across to better life. So that tells us that there is a problem. The problem is the development of Africa is driving people out. And it's a challenge, not just for the African government, not just for the African Union, but also for Africans as a people. Because the AU need to open up and realize that the development of Africa is not just entrusted to the officials that have been so lucky to get into their political positions, both in the African countries and at the AU level. We must open it up.
So, Alex, you see this as a mainly African problem.
It is an African problem.
Demons. Don Flynn, you have written about this, saying that African migrants aren't just fleeing to Europe, they're fleeing from Europe's legacy in Africa. So you see this as a more European problem, do you?
Well, I agree very much with what Alice has said, that what we're dealing with here is not only the question of poverty, but it's also the question of development, but a particular type of development. A development that we see, for example, in Ethiopia at the moment, where there are giant hydroelectric dams being built in the southeast of the country. A big step in the direction of modernity and economic development, but displacing tens of thousands of traditional people living in that area with no obvious jobs being created. But
it's not just the traditional people who are leaving, it's often the well-educated, it's often the urban people who are trying to get out of the country.
That's exactly right. I mean, the example of Ghana it illustrates that. Last year, the economy grew by 7%. The year before that, it was by 14%. 250,000 young people entered the jobs market in Ghana, of whom only 2% found jobs there. And these are the educated, these are the kids who have done exactly what they were supposed to do. They've invested in their education, they've done their best, and the jobs aren't for them. And in those circumstances, it's no surprise that these people see themselves, look for a future. They can't find it in their own country, they have to move elsewhere.
The tone has softened from the European Union of late, has it not? Particularly the tone from the Italian government, which has put under great pressure to do something about this, to ramp up the naval patrols. What more do you want to see from the European Union and from the African Union?
I think the big problem with the European Union is its approach to Africa is that it's all about returns. There's only really one big immigration issue on the agenda when the Europeans sit down with the Africans, and that is you've got to take back the people that we're deporting. And they keep coming back to that.
And we were talking about a huge bill, aren't we? The EU's bill on this. They were spending 20 million euros in 2006, and now it's nearly 90 million euros by 2010. It's probably around 100 million now. This is a very significant amount of money. Is it money well spent?
No, it's not money well spent, and it's not just the Europeans who are incurring these costs. It's also the African countries like Morocco, the countries of the Maghreb. Assume huge levels of responsibility of that.
Well, some of them are getting paid by the European Union to do this. Colonel Gaddafi, when he was alive, was being paid.
Certainly, there was all sorts of opportunities of that sort taking place there. But the fact of it is that, I mean, is it really an interest, for example, for Algeria to be policing its border with Nigeria in the way that the Europeans demand that it does, that they securitise a whole chain of migration that goes deep into the heart of Africa, when in fact Algeria has always needed workers. Their gas fields, their industrialisation in that country has always been dependent on the movement of migrants coming from other parts of Africa. And yet it does create the sort of tragedies that we had only a week or so ago, where a group of women, apparently, they weren't coming to Europe, they were actually coming to visit their relatives.
And that's the situation in Niger, and a lot of people have pounced on this situation to say, maybe that's one solution, because the government of Niger, following that tragedy where around 90 or so women and children perished trying to cross the Sahara to get to Algeria, they closed down the camps. And they threaten great punishment on people smugglers. Is that what African governments need to do?
No. That is not what needs to be done. What needs to be done is that African governments need to understand that the development of Africa does not rest with them alone. That they need to create the enabling environment to encourage professional Africans to return from exile, self-imposed exile, to go back into their various countries or anywhere in Africa to be part of the developmental process of Africa. If we look at the 1950s, the West was developed through the encouragement of immigrant workers into their own countries to help fuel the developmental process.
Well, this is a post-war process, isn't it?
This is it. And also we saw even the transatlantic enslavement was also encouraged by the West trying to use labor to develop their land. Africa need to now understand that the time has come for Africa to develop, because we cannot continue to be the way that we are.
But the big question, Alice, is what happens in the meantime, because each and every day there'll be hundreds, if not thousands of people dotted all across those frontline states trying to get to Lampedusa, trying to get to Malta, trying somehow to get across the Mediterranean Sea,
which is
where the AU Commissioner, Dr. Ukoko, comes in. The question now then is how you address that appeal from Alice Ukoko and others to reduce the pull factors and to keep Africans in Africa with hope.
Yes.
Yeah, can I come in there?
Yes, please, it's to you, sir.
Yeah, I could understand, from which direction the previous speaker was just coming. Yes, we are looking at the diaspora, and we have a lot of programs that are encouraging people to come back. But I agree with you, the question is people are dying now, and what can we do about that? Those are long-term programs. Now, in the African Union, before this incident, we have quite a number of programs. We have the Migration Common Policy for Africa. We have the African Common Position on Migration and Development. We also have the Ouagadougou Plan. But these are all long-term solutions. I agree with you. To reduce the push factors, we have to look at it in a socio-economical development point of view. We have to develop the continent at such a level whereby nobody wants to leave. Now, how many years do you think that will take?
It's going to take a very long time, I suspect,
Commissioner. What can we
Commissioner.
do with people dying now?
But what could be done to stop those people dying now? Perhaps removing the border controls, perhaps doing like the EU has done and enabling people to travel much more easily across African borders. So you might come from a country of instability and poverty and take your labour to a country of stability and prosperity.
Well, a lot of that is happening in Africa at the moment. You remember at the beginning of this interview, I told you that we have a very large number of Africans moving from one country to the other. And crossing the Mediterranean is one of the issues. But the majority, believe me, of movements is actually between one African country and the other.
Dr. Ukoko, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Now let's have a look see what some of our viewers have been saying via the Facebook page this week. Lots of comments coming in. This first one is from Kojo Gole, who says, the African Union needs to make this issue a priority. We can't wait on the EU to solve this problem, as they're only interested in keeping the boats from landing on their shores, not the safety and welfare of the desperate migrants. We have another post on Facebook from Kabdi Kassis Maxamed Kali, who says, I feel really disappointed and frustrated about this situation. Most people dying this way, drowning at sea, are aware that it's a life and death decision, but it's a risk they're willing to take.
Yes.
So often these peoples are escaping from hunger and civil wars in their country. And finally this from Esther Coker, who says, until all the countries in the world can secure food, water, a good standard of living and peace for their citizens, there will always be an element of migration. The sad thing is that at a time of such positivity about the continent, with the so-called Africa Rising mantra, it is overwhelmingly Africans who are paying the ultimate price for the chance of a better life. And if you'd like to have your say, here's how you can get in touch.
Keep your thoughts coming in. Email africa@presstv.co.uk or text us on +44 78 00 00 8086. Or you can go to our Facebook fan page, Africa Today, Press TV London. Or you can now follow us on Twitter We are at Africa Today TV.
Let's get back to our discussion, and we'll pick up on some of those points with you, Don Flynn from the Migrants Rights Network. What kinds of rights do you think those people who are trying to get to Europe, travelling across the Sahara and the Mediterranean, what rights do they need?
Well, I think the first right is the right for their travel to be safe and secure. There's a lot can be done. It can be done immediately in order to do what we call safeguarding.
How do you do that
policy.
when much of this is underground?
Well, by bringing it up from underground and putting it on the surface. We know that people go. We know that men migrate to Algeria in order to work in gas fields. It's only a matter of time before the women and children want to go and visit them. In those circumstances, it ought to be absolutely clear that they have a right to do that, and that the travel that they make from whatever country that they're in is going to take place in safe and secure circumstances.
But for that right to be guaranteed, you're going to need Algeria to say, yes, OK, even though you have come and you haven't come through the right channels, we're going to accept you because we need labour. Are they prepared to do that? And also you've got the government, I suppose the host government, whether it's Niger, whether it's Nigeria, they're going to have to agree with this too, aren't they?
Well, I mean, there are models for doing this. In West Africa, there is a free movement regime that extends right across the West African Economic Community.
Yes.
So that, you know, there's tremendous progress has been made there at the moment. And it's a question of building on these models. But I think that the principle ought to be there, and it ought to be reiterated time and time again, that the business of travelling within the African continent ought to be safe and secure. There are obviously hazards there in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the conditions that people travel in, but we need an absolute assurance that instead of closing down safe havens where people can stop and refresh themselves, have access to water and so on, exactly the opposite needs to be done. So
you're making this appeal to what, the African Union or to member states? The question is, where does the power lie? It's the member states, isn't it?
I think one of the things that is difficult, and I mean, you know, in Addis in a couple of weeks' time, there is going to be a meeting of the parliamentary bodies of the African Union and the European Union at the same time there. And the problem is that whenever African Union sits down with Europe, they get a list of demands about secure your borders, maintain control over people crossing from one place to the other, even if it's still 1,000 miles away from the Mediterranean, make sure that you're monitoring all of this progress. And, you know, trade and commerce and aid are often made dependent on these tasks actually being secured. Now, we have to break with that. It would be helpful, and I'm quite sure that there is a mood within Europe itself, the sort of organisations that we represent, that if there was real leadership coming out of the African Union on the basis of an appeal about development and human interest and human rights, then it would be taken up. There would be voices within Europe itself in order to amplify.
We'll put that by the Commissioner in a moment. Alice Ukoko, when you talk to the young people in Libya, as you did a couple of years ago, did you get the impression that if some of the things that Dawn has suggested were put in place, they would be prepared to stay on the continent? Or are the demons so great that they're prepared to get out no matter what?
When we talk about these matters, we make them sound so easy, so simple, that it's as if we just do this, then all will be well. It's not as simple as that. I have spoken with the youth, and what I saw in their eyes when I say, well, I was issuing a mother's order, said, don't ever try it. But the look was, it's all right for you to talk.
So you were there on the ground in Libya, in the camps, talking to these young men and women?
I was there. I was there, and I was issuing, because we have seen, I know already, the difficulties and the dangers that their movement caused. But the look is, it's okay for you to talk, but just talk and go. You can't tell me what to do when your generation has failed my generation. That's on one hand. The other hand is, the African spiritualism demands that if people are dying in water, something needs to be done. So one of the reasons that I was in Libya was also to go to the producer to do what needs to be done. And luckily, I was with my generation that came from America, and they too saw that, yes, it is a fact. When things happen, by Africa tradition and spirituality. Things are happening.
Did you pour a libation to them?
Not yet. I couldn't get to.
Okay.
I couldn't get to the place, but that was what we wanted to go. To do that, then that's on one hand. I also know when we talk about traveling within Africa easy. I have been to Ouagadougou, and I have met African women that have been transported by crooks across there and left there, and they went into prostitution. The appeal was, Mama, please don't forget us.
Yes.
And it's not just that we can travel around. I have met with the Maltese High Commissioner here, because those who survive, we're talking about those who perish in the Mediterranean. We're not talking about those who succeed in actually going through.
Yes.
Those that are succeeding and going into these countries, it isn't as if all is well there.
No.
So I went because I've been told and I'm bombarded by, Mama, do something. We are suffering in these places.
Well, you have the ear of the AU Commissioner, Dr. Ukoko, and he is still with us. Commissioner, what then is the message to both the European Union and, of course, the Arab countries with whom you're having a summit at the moment in Kuwait City?
Well, I've been listening carefully to all the inputs there. But look, there are no quick fix solutions to this problem. And you must address all the players, and all of us have to come together if we're going to make sense out of this problem. The way we're looking at it is that countries of origin, the transit areas, and the destination areas should all tackle the problem. I don't think it's all the question of impervious borders now, inter-African borders, that are playing here. All we are doing, we are playing into the hands of the smugglers, and there are countries, that have very good structures that could help us with the smuggling and things like that. People will move, I agree with you. They will always move to look for a better life elsewhere. That is something that needs to be accepted. Now, we take it from there. Now, we are trying to look at the long-term solution, because if we reduce the push factors, we create jobs for the youth, we create better environments for the youth, we stop the wars, stop the conflicts, we will reduce the push factors for people to be moving. That's one way of looking at it. Then, luckily, some of the transit areas, 9 of them are member states of the African Union. If you look at the League of Arab States, 9 of them are of the African Union. So we can look at making life better at the transit points. Then thirdly, we can also see if we can make it easy for migrants who want to go abroad. Like, they can approach the embassies, try to get a visa rather than going to pay $20,000.
That's quite a shopping list, Dr. Ukoko, and there we must end it. Thank you very much indeed for being so clear there. That's an agenda to work toward, and that's it for today. Thanks to all those of you who've sent in comments to us. Email africa@presstv.co.uk or text us to +44 7800 00 8086. And you can also follow us on Twitter @AfricaTodayTV. Many thanks to our guests, Don Flynn, Alice Ukoko, and His Excellency, Dr. Mustafa Siddiqui Kaloko. Join us next week for another edition of Africa Today. Till then, it's goodbye. And on behalf of the whole team, thanks again for watching.